So our guest speaker today is Dane Stevenson. He has written a book called Reclaim Your Power to Create Your Best Life. And I think the best introduction is actually what is written on the back of his book. Dane's need to heal from a childhood trauma led him on a personal journey which resulted in a process that brought him relief and inner peace. The neurotrauma healing process is the result of that journey. NTHP has been called the next step in the evolution of psychological healing and spiritual growth. It will give you the keys to your life back by showing you how you can move out of the bondage of pain, mentally, emotionally, and even physically. Dane is the owner of an extraordinary life and healing center. He is the developer of the neurotrauma healing process and the soul recognition process. Dane brings these two profound processes to audiences around the world, and we are so fortunate to have him here at Genesis. He was at East West Bookstore yesterday, so we know we are in good company. Please welcome Dane Stevens to the stage.
Can you hear me now? There we go. We're back in business. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Reverend Gail. She's wonderful. And happy 17th birthday. That is so cool. That is so cool. Yeah. And we love this place. This place is fantastic. So thank you for having us. Learned a snappy new tune. And just love the energy of this place. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having us. Yes, my name is Dane Stevens, and I am a trauma specialist. I had no intention of becoming a trauma specialist. It is what occurred in my life, and it became, my path has been very clear and very obvious in that way because I kind of had to. What I like to do today is share with you the journey that I went on that took me to what I do now and where I am in my life now. And show you how it really connects the dots in regards to how we are mental, physical, spiritual beings and how they are completely and perfectly intertwined, how it is synchronistically perfect. And in some ways that's going to seem, we might not know that intellectually, but we have things going on in our life that maybe it may seem otherwise. And I'm going to maybe speak to that and hopefully bring that a little bit of light to you in your life. So when I say the word trauma, most people think of some extremely a big physical or emotional experience or event that happens, something like being in a car crash or the experience of war or being severely abused in a way where you know that you have been abused and you know you've experienced trauma. And it's true, those are all traumas. They are big T traumas. The little t traumas are the ones that are they're a little harder to get a finger on. We might not know that we've experienced abuse. With a little t trauma, an example of that is maybe we grew up with a high-functioning alcoholic. And if that was the case as a child, we might not even know that we're on the receiving end of abuse. And this person who is an alcoholic is literally abusing themselves through alcohol and cannot help but pass it on. So because that's the way it was for us with our family, our caregiver, then we didn't know. And we didn't know that we altered our behavior or created a belief about ourselves that changed our natural outflow of energy. And therefore we experienced trauma and didn't even know it. Maybe we were neglected, and with neglect, nothing happened. I didn't experience trauma, nothing happened. It was fine. But with neglect, once again, if we don't get that attention, that recognition, then we form a belief about ourselves, and that natural energy, our natural energy flow is skewed, and we act out or act in a different way. And then there's one that most people can't identify with, and that's the dysfunctional family dynamic. And with a dysfunctional family dynamic, just because of the family dynamic, we have had to act in a certain way. And We skewed our natural outflow of energy to fit in or to not get hurt or to stay out of the line of fire or what have you. And therefore, that became what is considered trauma. And the reason I speak about this first is because not everybody identifies with trauma. But the fact is, there's not too many people that don't have looping within them some degree of what is termed trauma. How many people here don't have enough? So I'm just going to put out, don't have to raise your hands because it can be personal, but how many people here have some kind of a chronic condition, a negative pattern, or an unwanted behavior, or even an addictive behavior? I mean, how many people have some pattern, something in their life that keeps occurring that they would rather didn't keep occurring? Pretty much all of us have something like that going on. And if that's the case, I can pretty much assure you you have something stuck looping in your nervous system unprocessed. And I'm now going to share my story with you as to how the process that I now teach came about, and how this process can help you to bring that to resolution and a whole lot more I learned. So, excuse me. My journey started with a relationship. Not uncommon. I think most people have had their hearts broken. In this room, it seems like a prerequisite in that way. But growing up, I was a very black and white person. If I couldn't touch it, taste it, feel it, smell it, wasn't real, I had no idea I had a spiritual bone in my body. So when I met somebody in my early 20s that brought up emotion in me, I didn't know how to deal with that very well. And we fell in love, and the emotions came up, and it was a fiery relationship. We had great excitement, and it had its passions, and it had its sparkling new love, but it was also a very immature relationship. It had its misunderstandings, its inability to communicate, and we fought a lot. There was still blame going on there, so we fought a lot. We went along in this relationship for quite a long time, and broke up and got back together, and broke up and got back together, and broke up and got back together. And it came to the point where we had to either, kind of do this or don't. So I did the only obvious thing, and I gave her a ring. And we went on. We continued this relationship for probably close to 18 months or so, and then we ended up breaking up. And when we broke up, I was incredibly emotional. It felt like my soul was bleeding. And that was very strange because I'm the one that induced the breaking up most of the time. So when we broke up and I was so insanely emotional, it made me wonder what kind of a hopeless, hapless romantic am I? And what's going on here? Near the end of the relationship, we started to see a marriage counselor. And I had hoped that we'd see the marriage counselor so she would continue on with her and get the help that she needed. That's not the way it worked out. I continued on with this counselor, and the counselor got me started in meditation. And that was a huge thing for me to get started in meditation. And I was so mentally and emotionally drained. I just had left everything with her. We lived in a condo, and I just left everything. And a friend of mine, they owned orchards, and I moved into one of their, it's called a picker shack. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but a picker shack is where the pickers stay, and it is literally a 200 to 300 square foot shack with a bed and a kitchenette thing. And I was living there, and in meditation, I hardly even could go to work. I was so mentally and emotionally drained. And I was meditating for hours on end in the orchard in this picker shack. And in that time, something happened. I literally saw the crystal within me and realized life within me. I had a Satori experience where all of a sudden I was aware of life within me. My whole life just came up. I was still in this terrible state of woundedness, but everything came up. And what also came up in that great enlightening time was a memory. It was a memory of being sexually abused from 6 to 8 years old. You can't forget about that. It's not something you just, oh, I forgot. It was so painful and so overwhelming for that young mind, how old I was at the time, that I had to push it out of the way. I just couldn't deal with it, so I just pushed it out of the way. And here it is, 16, 17 years later, it came up and I remembered. I was like, oh, my goodness. And I realized that that insane emotion I was feeling in that relationship was that 6-year-old. Whether I wanted to admit it or not, that first relationship between 6 and 8 was my first intimate love relationship. That sounds very twisted, but what happened was when I had feelings that were similar, when I fell in love, I was very obviously open and able to vulnerable at that young age. When I had that experience in my mid-20s, it triggered that and it all came up. So even though I had this amazing, enlightening awareness of the life within me, I was still very much going through my woundedness and still felt like my soul was bleeding. So as we do when we are wounded and hurt, I went back to my roots and I went back to my mother and where my family was at the time. And little did I know that she had been a student of the science of mind for 2 or 3 years. And because I was such a black and white person, she thought, oh, I'm not going to tell him. He's just going to negate it or poo-poo it or what have you. I probably would have. But seeing the shape that I was in, she thought, well, maybe this is a good time to introduce him to this teaching. And she took me to a service. That was in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I don't know how many people have been with Science of Mind or how long you've been with Science of Mind. But Dr. Arlene Bump was the minister at that point, and she was actually the president of RSI. It was RSI at that point, not CSO. And I remember sitting there for the first 4 services, and it's like she had a spotlight just on me, and she was talking just to me. And I hung on her every word. It was time for my awakening. It was time for me to wake up. I was waking up. And I feel really fortunate that I was introduced to this teaching because I was so raw and so vulnerable at that time. I feel very fortunate that I was introduced to a teaching that was so open, so inclusive, and so accepting of everybody. So I feel very, very grateful and appreciate the Science of Mind teaching that I was brought into. So I did embrace the teaching. I took all the classes, and I ended up teaching the Sunday school. I eventually took over the teen group, and after a while, I even started to open services. And I got very involved in the teaching, and I learned about manifestation and all that stuff. And fast forward 10 years later, I had created a really great life for myself. I actually had moved to Vancouver and had a coaching and training business. Had great employees, making great money, doing some traveling, living in a beautiful place off the ocean, driving the vehicle of choice. Everything was working just as I wanted it to be, except for my relationships. With my relationships, I discovered, it took a while and a bit of willingness to look at the pattern, but I would have a relationship and then end it prematurely and seek intimacy elsewhere. End it prematurely, seek intimacy elsewhere. And this pattern went going on until I had to look at it. And in looking at it, I had to ask myself, have I dealt with this childhood abuse issue? And because I asked the question, I knew that I was going to have to go in and do some work around it. So I went to some groups, and that didn't quite resonate with me. And I did some just talk therapy and Gestalt and stuff, and nothing seemed to really spur me. And then I was referred to a healer therapist, and she came highly recommended. So I went to see her, and she assessed me and said I had a circ in my lower chakras. And I don't know if you all know the chakra systems, basically just the energy systems of the body, different energy systems. So that she said that I had a circ in my lower chakra, which made sense. And a number of sessions in, and she was not cheap, but I was making good money, so I wasn't too worried about it. And I was just really solid in my life. I had a real solid spiritual practice and so on. And she asked me if I would like to try and break that energy circle. And she likened it to hitting a home run. And who doesn't want to hit a home run? So I said, sure. And what that meant is trying to force the trauma out. And I had no knowledge of trauma at that time, very little knowledge of energy at that time. So I had no idea that in saying yes, that you could hit a foul ball instead of hitting a home run. And we did. Well, I say we hit a foul ball, but I'm not going to put it that way. But it was a number of sessions later, and she had me on a table. She worked with me on a table and twisted me in different positions and so on. And I remember she had me twisted in some position and told me to go there, go there. And I was so disoriented, I couldn't even tell which way was up or down. I was just like, and I came off the table scared for no apparent reason. And I assumed that this energy would subside. And it didn't. It felt like I was plugged into a 220 volt outlet and I had jittery plate joints. And like I say, I just assumed that it'd calm down and subside, so I left there and didn't worry about it. And I kept coming for sessions, but it did not subside. And as we all know here, the inside creates the outside. So feeling unstable, feeling fearful, feeling alone, my outer world started to mirror that. And I started to lose clients and contracts, and I lost the sale of the business. And I wasn't a millionaire by any stretch, but I had some money. But within 18 months, I was broke. And within 3 years, I became homeless. I went on a mad search trying to figure out what the hell happened to me. She stopped seeing me because I ran out of money, but more so because I think she didn't know what she did, and she was scared and didn't know how to fix it. So I was trying to hold on to anything, but I just could not hold on to anything. It's like somebody had turned a vacuum into my life, and I lost it all. I ended up sleeping in my car when I had a car. From there, I went to sleeping on the beach where I could. And at one point, I got a job in construction, and I would, after we finished work, I would leave and then come back and sleep in the unfinished house, and then leave early before we left, and then come back and work. I was just trying to grasp for anything, but I was in a total free fall. It took me 5 years to find somebody who could tell me what the hell happened to me. And she is, ironically enough, a trauma specialist. I guess that's how we're made. She had, and ironically enough, because she had the same thing happen to her. That's the ironic part. She had a therapist try to force the trauma on her and totally messed her up. And now she's a trauma specialist. So through Hazel, I learned how we process things and how trauma works. She was a student of Peter Levine. Anybody know Peter Levine? Yeah, somatic experiencing. So through that, I learned about how we process information and how trauma works, which gave me understanding, which was, gave me hope. And seeing Hazel, where she was, how she was doing so well, and she had the same thing happen to her, it gave me great hope. So I had great hope. But I did not get the relief that I needed from that work. But I did get understanding. It wasn't until I connected with John Bradshaw, Dr. John Bradshaw. Anybody know Dr. John Bradshaw? Yeah. And with Dr. John Bradshaw's work, it was left-right brain work, and I made a connection to that scared and fearful part within me. And that was a very exciting time, a huge moment where, oh my God, I've made the connection. I've connected with this part, and I can deal with this. And I did this work on my own for about 8 months, and in that 8 months, I still couldn't bring this part to being safe, into safety. I couldn't unfreeze this fear from looping within me, even though I was like having dialogue and getting intimate with this part. I couldn't get it unfreezed. It was so frustrating. It was like a fight against myself, and I remember almost like trying to get this part to come on, quit being afraid. And it was, how absurd is that? So I wasn't out of the woods yet, but I had that connection, and I knew it was there. I phoned any counselor that I knew. I scanned the internet and asked any counselor that if they knew this. Nobody knew this work. And nobody would do it. I tried to actually talk counselors into doing the work, and nobody would do it. And then, it's about a year from looking, there was somebody across the street from me who did this work, who had done the work. And Mary Hoffman was very generous with her time. She said she would work with me, and she did. And within 2 months, I had traction. That's a consistent, positive, and healthy relationship. And I was able to take the work over on my own just after 2 months working with her, doing the same thing, but having an outside view of being able to see where I couldn't. So I was able to take the work over on my own, and I no longer have any anxiety. I no longer have any of that fear going on inside of me. I no longer have any of that negative relationship pattern. My other half, which is a real story, how we got together, because we used to go in high school with a 25-year gap, and we're going on our 8th year, and it's just right. None of that is going on inside of me. But the real magnificent part about that is when we heal these parts. And when I say heal, what we're doing is we're bringing these parts of ourselves back who have a belief in separation. When we can bring those parts back into present time where that's not happening anymore, all of your energy starts to flow in the same direction. You come back to your nature. Your natural energy begins to flow. And, in the Genesis saying, we talk about acceptance, how we accept everybody and don't judge everybody. But unless we quit judging and can fully accept ourselves, it's not coming through. It starts with us. And when we are able to bring these parts of ourselves back, our natural energy flows. We get back to our nature. Our nature is peaceful. It is powerful. It is abundant. It is beautiful. It is creative. That's your nature. And when I say your nature, there's no effort there. That is what you are. That is your hard wiring. So all we need to do is get these parts of ourselves that are looping within us that have a belief otherwise. It's not about learning. We all know way too much. It's about unlearning what we don't know that we know. Anybody ever heard of Carl Jung? How we work as human beings to an iceberg, with that 10% above the water of the iceberg, that is the conscious mind. And the 90% that is below, that is the subconscious mind. And if we try to do it from here, from our conscious mind, we're using the tip of the iceberg. When we're able to connect with and allow that and be in alignment with that 90%, that's where life flows naturally, easily. And we get to simply be fully who we are. And there's no effort there. So I encourage you and I challenge you to take a look at these places in your life where there's a pattern, whether it be with your health, whether it be with your relationships, whether it be with your finances, whether it be just be self-esteem, maybe you keep self-sabotaging yourself. And I encourage you to embrace them. Because this is the universe trying to get your attention and take you inward. The question we tend to ask in North America, and I'm pretty sure everywhere else, but when we talk about the medical system, here when we have something that we don't like or don't want, especially with our health, we ask the question, how do I get rid of it? How do I get rid of it? Wrong question. That question says that there's something wrong or bad about that, and it's not. It is there for you for a reason. It is there to get your attention, to try and get you to go inside. When we do say yes to this, so first of all, in saying there's something wrong and bad, we're saying that it shouldn't be there and that it's wrong. And once again, it's not. It is there for us. When we embrace it and say yes to it, when we can give it a voice, and we ask the question, what is this? That's when we go in the right direction. We're pointing in the right direction inside. We want to try, or we tend to try to get our answers and our healing outside of ourselves. And as long as we go outside, we are missing the mark. And so I just came to the realization a while ago that the biggest sin, which is simply an archery term that means miss the mark, is fear and worry. Because with fear and worry, it is the cutting off of source, or this declaration that source isn't here. And all of these patterns you have in your life, source, God, is right in the middle of those two. God doesn't know bad, doesn't know evil, doesn't know sin, doesn't know wrong. When source is all, it's all working for the same thing, or as the same thing. Underneath those patterns that you're experiencing is love, is who you really are, is connection. So I challenge you to stop and embrace the places in your life that look like they're out of sync. Sometimes our growth doesn't look like we think it should. But as long as we keep tuning out, we're going to keep missing the mark. When we tune in and ask the question and let this part speak, that's where healing occurs. And that is the ultimate voyage in self-discovery, in allowing who we are to come forth. No technique, no trying, no willing, no straining. We allow who we are to come forth. And who you are is magnificent. And there's no effort there. Who you are is healthy. And there's no effort there. Who you are is love. You don't need to do anything or change anything to be loved. It is who and what you are. So I would like to show you all this simple and profound process that we do that gives you direct access to the life within you in a safe and gentle manner. And most of us just don't know how to do our work, how to do that inner work, how to make that inner connection. And that's what I would like to show you all today. In making that inner connection, it's simple in the process, and profound because it's very powerful, because this is the 90%. This is accessing the 90%, where we try to no longer trying to will or strain from what we think we know and the limited part that we do know. So in this process that we're going to do today, we're going to take you through the actual experience yourself so you make a connection. Because I can sit here and talk till I'm blue in the face, and it's still just theory. But when you make the connection, you know. And that knowing and that relationship, that's the healing. It's literally in the connection itself. That is the healing. It's kind of funny because, put in that way, enlightenment is instant. It's the awareness. And we just have to keep remembering or connecting. So, and when we do this work, you don't have to keep, it's not a coping skill. It's not about trying to overcome, not about trying to blow through. You get to bring your past to resolution, not change it, because there's nothing wrong with it. It was there for you. And there's another part I'm going to address. Spiritual bypass can be the same thing where, it's all good, it's all God, which is true. But as long as we say it's all good, it's all God, but don't go inside and don't do our inner work, our life is a complete mess, but we have this declaration that it's all good, it's all God, and meanwhile our life is a mess. Spirit is not hiding from you. It is not some mystical thing that we have to figure out. It's all here for us right here, right now. We just have to be open and embrace the fullness of our life. And that means looking at and saying yes to these patterns that appear to be out of alignment, because they are out of alignment. They're out of alignment to get your attention to go inside so you can realign. This is everybody's story. It's the story of coming home. And that's why we're all having these challenges. And you're going to keep having these challenges until you go inside and let yourself, capital S, out. Thank you all so much. I love you. You guys are wonderful. I guess we're having the workshop after the potluck today. And anybody who does the workshop gets half off the book. So come on and hope to see you all there. Love this place. Love you guys. Thank you so much.